Okay, hi, my name is Katie Lau. I am the Program and Collections Director at the Holocaust Awareness Museum and Education Center in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. I have the incredible privilege right now of interviewing Roberta Grossman, Director of Reckonings. And a quick thank you to Matthew and PJFM for the opportunity to get to do this. Roberta, if you're ready, I have my questions in front of me and we can just hop right in.
Please dive right in. Dive right in.
So the first thing, that I thought of the whole time I was watching the movie was, I am a Holocaust historian, and so often when you look at the Holocaust and the war, what happened afterwards is not really a part of the conversation. It is usually overshadowed with this assumption that somehow we just got where we are today. And your film breaks that down completely and really goes into the nitty gritty of what happened afterwards. And I'm wondering how you came to create a film about this period of time, about the reparations, and sort of what in your career led you to this point.
Well, I was invited to make this film by the Claims Conference. The Claims Conference and the German government, the German Finance Ministry, that are the entities that continue to negotiate for reparations for survivors on a yearly basis to this day. They wanted to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the signing of the Luxembourg Agreements. And Karen Helig at the Claims Conference, who's a attorney there, she is the unofficial historian of the Claims Conference, and she knows how fascinating the story really is and how few people know it. So she had the idea of making a film, and I'm glad she did, because we managed in the film Reckonings to get, the last living participant, Ben Ferenz, in an interview. So I think what brought me to it is that I have made many films that deal with the Holocaust, and also I've done films that make fairly significant use of recreations. Although at first the Claims Conference and the German government didn't think they wanted recreations in this film, I was able to convince them that the reason to use them is to enhance the drama and engage audiences. This is why I do it. I like to make documentaries that have the gravitas of a documentary with extreme attention to historical detail and accuracy, the use, consulting with scholars, interviews with scholars, and also to use recreations as a way to have the sort of best of both worlds: the gravitas of a documentary and the emotional pull of a drama.
Mhm.
um, I mean, that's my conceit, as a filmmaker. And that's as a filmmaker who loves history and who's very dedicated to telling Jewish stories and Holocaust stories in particular. To me, it feels like so far I've been happy with the results.
Well, viewing it, I can say I think what you went for was pulled off beautifully.
Thank
I
you.
felt the gravitas. I felt that it was very well rooted in the history you were telling. Um, but sort of, you mentioned the recreations. I found that you did an incredible job at creating very human portraits of these people who could feel larger than life. They pulled off this incredible thing. What led you to the decision to create these real human portraits of these people, and how do you feel you did that?
I think that heroes are quite boring, right? Because first of all, even heroes are flawed, even if they're not presented that way. And that we as humans, as viewers watching films, very hard to relate to a hero, heroine, and much easier to relate to a real human being.
Hmm.
So if the goal is to once again pull audiences in, to make them feel something about the story that's being told, to make people pay attention to actually watch it, then you need to have, flesh and blood as much as possible, rounded characters. And of course, in a film like this, there's not that much time, um, because there's so much history to convey, and so many plot points to convey. But these were real people, and there were humorous moments as well as dark moments. And I think it really helps to make viewers understand, to make us understand that history is made by us.
Mm.
that significant change is made by individuals, that even the most momentous events are created by individuals or a group of individuals. So that's kind of at the core of, as a historian, that history is a collection of the stories of individuals.
I think that's especially important when we're talking about momentous changes in the way the world is run, like this, or almost inconceivable events like the Holocaust. We always
Yeah.
have to ground it in the reality of the fact that people were affected or people did this thing.
Right. This is why, I mean, obviously, this is why people, Anne Frank her diary has been for decades the best-selling book, I believe, of all time, after the Bible.
The Bible, that's right.
It's because she's a girl, she's a person. We can see her contours, we can relate or not relate, or admire or judge or whatever we do when we're meeting another human. And I think that films and books about the Holocaust are most powerful when they convey the experiences of individuals.
Was there a person in this history that you found yourself relating most to?
I don't know if I can relate to any of them really truly, because the survivors, I love them. I relate to the fear of history intervening in my life, but
Yeah.
I haven't experienced it on that level. Um, but I think I could say, maybe I'll reframe your question and say that I'll tell you the character who I love the most, and it's kind of unfair, is Ben Ferenz, because he is such a monumental person in everything that he's accomplished in his life, and he's so funny, and he's so iconoclastic. And I love that he went on from the work that he did for reparations, both before and after the Luxembourg agreements, and with his law degree. And what he did was really continue to work towards peace in the world, because as he states, wars create atrocities. Wars are inherently atrocious, right? So, he went on to help to form the criminal court, the International Criminal Court. So he remained so optimistic about what could be achieved, and I love that about him.
An
Uh,
incredible thing about working with survivors, people who have seen terrible things or been through terrible things, the resilience and the sustained hope for the world, for humankind. It's an incredible thing to witness. And I've been wanting to ask, you've sort of referenced this, but what was it like getting to meet Ben Friends and work with him and talk about his experiences?
well, that's an interesting question, but maybe not the answer, not in quite the way that you mean, because we made this film during COVID.
Ah,
So, and as you know, he's far along in years. So, and the
yeah.
survivors as well. So I couldn't travel to them. They couldn't travel to a central location to be interviewed. And so what we did is I worked with a cinematographer who's very tech savvy, and he created a package of cameras, monitors, computers, um, sound equipment, and we mailed it to basically an assistant camera person in these cities near where these people were. I'm so sorry. And so the survivors and Ben, I was interviewing them over computer.
Oh, you couldn't tell at all. You could not tell at all. That's just such a shock to me.
And the scholars in Israel, and there was a scholar in in Australia, and even most of the B-roll, like the shooting in Luxembourg, going through the streets and the alleys at night, and also the castle. I could see what the cinematographer was shooting around across the world, but I wasn't there, and my DP was with me.
Wow.
He was saying, "Could you frame that a little bit more?" The only thing that I did in person were the recreations, which I shot in Poland.
I mean, it sounds like it was just such an endeavor and required such innovation and problem solving. Is
Well,
there,
I was really lucky. I mean, just on a personal note, as a filmmaker, because filmmaking is so high touch, documentary, well, all kinds of filmmaking, but that I was able to keep working on this during the pandemic was pretty
Right.
cool.
Is there an aspect of it that you are most proud of?
Yes, I am proud that I was able to facilitate the German government, German finance ministry, and the claims conference, two entities that have from the beginning basically been at odds, inherently at odds, one representing the Nazi perpetrators, one representing the survivors, the victims, that I was able to facilitate, me as the third party, that I was able to facilitate coming up with one story to tell.
There is a larger lesson there about the power of meeting in the middle and having difficult conversations and seeing if healing is possible that is certainly reflected in the film as well. Do you want to speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the film is ultimately hopeful because these sort of congenital enemies were able to come together across a table in person, which is a key element, if not the key element. And the table sort of represents this, what I see it as like the chasm of the Holocaust, the
Mm,
rift of the Holocaust, the rift in humanity, the rift in civilization, the rift in our ability to believe in humanity. And they were able to, because they came together, they found a way to come together in the same room, and look one another in the eye. They were able to speak to each other and come out with a really positive outcome for the survivors. I mean, the survivors will argue, oh, it wasn't enough, it wasn't, whatever it was a positive outcome on some level for the survivors. At least it represented some form of an apology in the way that our legal system works, that if you do a harm, that usually the apology is also comes with some kind of a payment.
mm,
um and also especially for like the younger people that you see in the film, they had nothing, right? So even getting small amounts of money, they were allowed them to put clothes on their backs or roofs over their head or go to school or whatever. Survivors that I spoke to now who continue to get the reparations say, when I receive the check, it's kind of horrible because it brings me back to my unutterably horrible experiences. Then I put it in a separate account, and if one of my grandchildren wants a cool bike, I buy it with that money. It's not enough money to like change my standard of living. I use it to go visit relatives or to go to Israel, or
mm.
so different survivors have dealt with the money and how they use it in different ways. One of the things that the survivors say is obvious in a way, and you could look at this on both a practical and on a moral level, that in a way the reparations may have done more for the Germans and for Germany than it did for the survivors.
Hmm.
But it forced the Germans as a society and the German government to grapple with these issues and take responsibility. And I love the idea in the film that one of the German government officials says that I don't believe in individual guilt for the people who were born, generations after these events, but we have a collective responsibility. And I think that's a wonderful way to look at all kinds of issues that may require or may suggest reparations. When discussions are had in the United States about reparations for slavery, a lot of people will say, a lot of people who are not African American will say, well, I wasn't, my family didn't even come until, regardless, we may not be individually, and we're not individually guilty, but we are collectively responsible for what our country has done. And harking back to the good that it does for the perpetrator as well as for the victim, I think that it's clear to see that starting with reparations and everything else that Germany has done, memorializing the Holocaust, making Holocaust denial a crime, having Holocaust, legislating Holocaust education in schools, that all sprung from the Luxembourg agreements, and that it has allowed Germany, because they've been willing to look at their past in a deep way, it has allowed them to remain a democracy all these years. And if you look at the countries that refuse to look at their collaboration, they're heading in a very authoritarian if not totalitarian direction today.
It's interesting you say that, from I am a public historian, and part of my practice, part of my education was looking into the practice of memorialization and reckoning. And Germany repeatedly is brought up as the global model for how to reckon with the past and how to memorialize the past and how to use the past to move forward as a functioning democracy. I mean, it's just constantly brought up in that way. I'm wondering if doing this work changed the way you feel about reparations or about collective responsibility, memory, remembrance, any of those things.
Well, I've always, well, good question. I Making this film did not change the way I looked at reparations because I knew nothing about reparations before starting to make the film. I know a lot about the Holocaust. I have been studying it, reading about it, making films about it since I was 12 years old, and I'm now 322 years old. So I have been, it has been my primary concern for a long time, but I did not know about reparations.
Mm,
I do think, even though I've been very aware of Germany as a model of dealing with the past and memorialization, and have for a long time felt that that was to Germany's benefit, um, I think that learning about the reparations and making this film was healing for me, and I'm not a survivor. But maybe we all, if we embrace this history as our own, maybe we're all survivors in the
mm,
sense of how painful it is to carry this history around
mm-hmm.
and how much it impacts our sense of, I don't know about you, but sense of hope for humanity and belief in humanity and civilization and
I'm at an interesting place in that journey. I mean, I think when you first begin to study history at a really intense higher level, it can sort of take you. I don't know if you had this experience, but me, I definitely had in my first few years, like several, I'm not going to say emotional breakdowns, but pretty close, where I was like, oh gosh, it's really hard to reckon with thousands of years of really intense damage done to each other and just but eventually you do have to get to a point where you're looking for the beautiful stories as well, and you're looking for the ways that we heal and the progress that we've made. I don't know if that was your experience as well, but at the beginning of my career, I certainly had some times where it was a bit much, and I didn't find a lot of healing in the history.
I because I've been grappling with the Holocaust in particular for all of my life, um I always thought people always would ask me, "Oh, how do you do this? And what is the impact on you? And doesn't it make you miserable?" And I'd be like, "No, no, not at all." And then I realized, like 3 years ago, when I was making my film "Who Will Write Our History," which is about the secret archive of the Warsaw Ghetto, which is the film I'm most proud of in a way. You know, they're all different, but when I was making that and in the aftermath of that, I realized of course it's impacted me.
Mm.
You know, I'm not the most fun gal.
That's how I feel about myself too. I don't tell people what I do at parties because
Yeah, well, I do because I'm not the most fun gal. You're probably more fun. But I'm the person on the beach reading, the diary of the head of the Judenrat, in
mm,
the ghetto called, the Scroll of Agony. It's like people think it's hilarious. And when my friends roll their eyes and say to me, "Oh God, not another film about the Holocaust," my retort for many, many years has been, "Oh, I didn't realize there'd been 6 million films." Right? Because there are lots of stories to tell. And if everybody else wants to stop telling them, that's fine. I'm going to continue on my own way because I feel that there's a way in which I feel like that some of the stories, if I don't tell them, they won't get told, you
sure.
know, or that my life is meaningful to me because I'm telling the stories.
I relate to that very much. And I hope you feel that you are not alone in a community of people who also feel drawn to sort of go down into these depths to tell these stories. And
I didn't mean that I'm the only one who will tell the stories. I mean that the resources that's required to make a film at this level, there are
mm,
not that many filmmakers who have been working as long as I have and who have made as many films as I have and who have the because of my reputation such as it is, I'm able to gather those resources.
mm,
Well, I'm talking about specifically on film. It's a
ah,
really expensive endeavor. And to make a film takes, like, this one took, I think, 2 years. It was a record time, and because of the support of the Clems Conference and the German government, and because it just was faster. And um Who Will Write Our History took 8 years.
wow. Well, okay, I think we have time for one more question, and I was going to ask you something different, but I'm very interested in something you just said. I'm wondering if you can close it out by sort of talking about why is it important that we do tell these kinds of stories on film? What is it about that media that feels so special to you and so powerful?
Well, I mean, there's a reason why, film is and television are the most popular art forms or medium in the world and have been ever since they, came on the scene. It's because the combination there's something magic about film, the combination of image, music, actors or real people. When those things come together, they're more than the sum of their parts.
Mm,
And film, whether it's a feature length film or a TikTok or something on YouTube or whatever it is, how long or short, that film is the language of communication of our time, and especially for younger people. And so I feel it's really important to tell Holocaust stories in that medium. It also is it's something that rises to a well-made film can at least attempt to rise to the level of the importance of the story it's telling. And That's why I don't believe in making films cheaply, or and also that film is an archival medium, right? So the films, like my film on the Warsaw Ghetto, the archive of the Warsaw Ghetto, is an archive in itself, of interviews, of the artifacts, of my recreations of the ghetto, of my recreations of the meetings of the Onyx Shabbos. That becomes an archive. Same thing is true for the Reckonings film. Right now, that exists as an accessible tool for learning. And in the process of cutting it, the version that's going to be shown the film festival is a feature-length version. There's a 52-minute version for broadcast, there's a 30-something-minute versions for classrooms. Maybe they'll end up cutting it down shorter for the internet. That becomes an incredible, those versions become incredible learning tools.
you just completely changed the way that I think about film. I've never thought of them as an archive in themselves. I think that's probably going to change the way that I view film moving forward. That's an amazing way of putting it, and it is so, so true.
And there's all kinds of ethical issues that we could talk about another time. And I get into real tangles with scholars because of my recreations.
I'm sure you do.
But you know what? I believe I'm right.
They were
If
very powerful. I
if you're
found them so.
careful and you're vetted before, during, and after by scholars, and you cut, everything from the pens that are used, the buttons on the coats, if everything has been really, really thought through historically, and you're using the historical documents, and from scholars and from participants what actually happened, and you're very true to that, um, do you want a powerful tool, or do you want this history to be forgotten? It's up to you.
Right,
Go ahead, choose.
right, right. Well, I think you pulled it off beautifully. It was extremely impactful, and it was such a pleasure to view it, and it was a pleasure to talk with you today about it. I wish we had 3 hours, but this was delightful.
For
And
me as well. Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much for your time.
And good luck with your public historian. I mean, because I think that there is an issue between the roles of museums and the roles of film, and how do they work together. I'm doing work for a museum right now in Lithuania, and the issue of what can a film do within the context of a museum is a very live topic.
Yes, 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 yes. Yes. And you talk about, you know, films as an educational tool. That's especially powerful when you're functioning as an education center as we are, where we're just trying to provide educational resources to young people. The process of vetting films, selecting films is time consuming, but when it's done well, there's nothing more powerful than a story told through film, particularly for young people. It makes it real. It makes it um like you said, they see themselves in it, and there's nothing more important than that when it comes to remembering something like the Holocaust. And the thing that everyone always says is never again, but the way to ensure that is to pull the humanity out of the story.
Yeah, true, true.
All right, Roberta, thank you so much. I seriously, this was incredible. I wish we had more time, but
Thank
for
you
now,
so much
thank
for
you.
good questions and conversation.
Of
Thanks a lot.
course.